and speaker. For more information or to contact me, if you have any questions about anything we discussed on the show, you can visit my website at sarahsotospeaks.com. As always, you can reach out to us here on The Quest at grnonline.com. Listen, I'm really excited to continue what we were talking about last week. So I gave a little, I guess you could call it the Eucharist 101. I think that's what I was referring to it as when I was speaking to a friend. Just sort of the basic most understanding that Catholics need to have about the teaching regarding the Most Holy Eucharist. And so we covered those basics, and I focused a lot on what I was calling aha moments for our Catholic brothers and sisters. So at some point or another, I hope and pray, perhaps you were born with great faith and you were taught about the Eucharist early on and you took it and believed it and never doubted it. But like many people, myself included, I fell away from the faith for a long time, and I came back after I had a big aha moment. I shared a couple of weeks ago my reversion story, my journey back to the faith, and a big part of that, if not perhaps the biggest part, was the deepening of my understanding and the realization that what the Catholic Church has always taught and teaches today and will always teach about the true presence of Jesus Christ, body, blood, soul, and divinity in the Most Holy Eucharist, it's true. It's all true, folks. And so my hope and prayer for you is that if you have not had that aha moment and you feel like perhaps you're going through some of those maybe some motions, right? The required mass attendance and receiving communion and going to confession as good Catholics do, as faithful Catholics that are practicing their faith do. My hope and prayer for you is that if you haven't had that aha moment, that you go to the Lord in prayer and ask, Lord, show me that this is you. And you may, because many people have throughout the Church's history, you may see the host turn into flesh and blood, and you may look into some of the Eucharistic miracles and say, "Oh my goodness, this is the cardiac tissue of a Middle Eastern man with a universal blood type who is currently alive and is under." At the time that the sample was retrieved, was under great stress, and you might say to yourself, "Wow, that's pretty wild. That Eucharistic miracle happened like 800 years ago." So it's pretty amazing that they, were able to tell all that from a sample of the host turned into flesh from so many years ago, hundreds of years ago. And so that might be part of your journey. You may have been in Mass and the priest elevates the host and you say to yourself, privately, quietly, "This is my Lord and my God." It might be just this great grace that the Lord bestows upon you when you look at that tiny host, which is the source and summit of our faith. And so as Catholics, we have to understand the basic tenets of what the Church teaches about the Eucharist, about what the Church teaches who the Eucharist is. We have to understand those things on a basic most level. But last week, on Thursday, when I was with you all, I had several callers come in and share their aha moments about the Eucharist. And so on today's show, we're going to continue some of those basic teachings you need to understand as a Catholic about the Eucharist. And also, I'm going to dive deeply into a section of the Catechism that talks about the fruits of receiving Holy Communion. So, as you know, if you are attending Mass on Sundays, we are going through the Eucharistic Discourse, which is found in the Gospel of St. John, which is John chapter 6, where Jesus is talking about the Eucharist and, giving his teaching on who the Eucharist is, which is him, his very body, blood, soul, and divinity. And so I don't ever remember going through this part of the Catechism when I was in CCD, when I was going to Sunday school. I don't think that we did, although we may have, and I could have just been flying my ADHD flag nice and high and not been paying attention, but I don't believe we covered this. I will say that, preparing for today's show and going through the fruits of Holy Communion has definitely renewed and deepened my love for the Most Holy Eucharist. And, with all the Eucharistic Congress and all of the processions leading up to it and all the hype, as the kids say, I want to remind people that it's not the Eucharist himself that needs revival. I've been saying this for the past couple of months now. It's us. Our hearts need revival. Our faith needs revival. And we need to come to a deeper understanding, a deeper love, and a deeper faith in what Jesus has said, which is that this is his very body, blood, soul, and divinity, and what that means for us when we receive his very body, blood, soul, and divinity. So, as I was saying last Thursday, we had several callers call in and share their aha moments. And so as I go through some of these basic teachings on the Eucharist that we need to know as Catholics and unpack and meditate upon what the Catechism says about the fruits of receiving Holy Communion, I invite you all to call in and share. Do you have a moment? Is there a moment in your faith journey? Is there a moment in your life where it dawned on you, or your faith was it was radically changed in a good way because you believed in a new way, and perhaps for the first time, that the host is really who he says it is, which is Jesus himself. And so I'll plug that number for you now. You can call in at any time and share. And the reason I want to encourage our listeners to share those aha moments is because you never know who's listening. Right? Because not everyone who's listening calls in. And the fact is that there may be somebody listening to today's show who needs to hear your specific and your story, not necessarily something I'm saying, but your story about your faith in the Eucharist. They may be on a similar journey, and they may come from a similar background, or they may have a similar struggle that you had and need help overcoming it. And so our brothers and sisters in Christ are, each of us is so unique. Each of us has our own story, but I encourage you, if you're a little apprehensive, or maybe you've never even called into a radio show before, or perhaps you've done it several times, I want to encourage our listeners today to call in and share your aha moment with the Eucharist, when you said, aha, it's Jesus. It's the Lord of Lords and the King of Kings right there in the tiny little white host. And so that number is 877-757-9424, and I'll continue to share that throughout our time together today. 877-757-9424 to share your, oh my goodness, it's really Jesus in the Eucharist moment with us here on The Quest. 877-757-9424. So to just kind of take it back, if you're just sort of joining us and tuning into today's topic, you need to understand what Catholics need to understand, and what all Christians need to understand about the Most Holy Eucharist, is that, and I covered this last week, I'll just touch on it here, that Jesus said that this is my body. He said, I'm going to give you living bread, and if you eat of this bread, you're going to live forever. And hey, by the way, that bread that I'm going to give is my flesh. And he didn't, this is very paraphrased, I hope you all know it doesn't say, Jesus didn't say, hey, by the way. And so for us, we take that literally, right? There are some parts of sacred scripture that are meant to be taken literally, and there are some parts that are songs, that are poetry, and certainly the Lord would have stopped those who were confused about this teaching and said, give us his flesh to eat. What is that, like a metaphor or something? Jesus would have said, if it would have been a metaphor, or if it would have been over exaggerated, or or anything other than true, and he heard all of these people saying, this is nuts. What is this guy talking about? Eat his flesh. Come on, Sid, let's get out of here. The truth is that Jesus, who is so much more than a good teacher, he's God. And if you believe that he's God, if you're a Christian, then you should know, you should have the wherewithal to say, all these people were saying, he can't really be giving us his flesh to eat. This is crazy. You should know that Jesus is going to correct them if they're wrong. I mean, if what they're saying is, if they're saying, give us his flesh to eat, no, and they're leaving, Jesus is not going to let them just walk away, knowing that they didn't understand. He's going to correct them and say, yes, you're right, it really is a metaphor. And he doesn't do that. He lets them leave. And just like those of us who are Catholic, who drive by our parishes on Sunday on our way to go, I don't know, go watch football, or go hang out with friends, go play pickleball, whatever it is the kids are doing these days. We drive past our parish much like those disciples who said, I see what you're offering me, Lord, and I'm just going to go ahead and walk away. We have that freedom too, right? The Lord grants us freedom. And in that freedom, we can most certainly choose to drive on by, to walk on by, and to leave. We can leave Jesus in the tabernacle. We can leave him there on the altar. God respects the choices that we make, even though he obviously desires to be in communion with us, right? We are created to be in communion with the most holy Trinity for all eternity. That's what we're made for. That's what we need. That's where we'll experience the most joy. We have the freedom. We have the freedom to reject God. We have the freedom to say no. But my hope for you is that you will love the Lord, your God, with all your heart, mind, and soul, and that you will pick up your cross and follow him. So we're going to talk all about how you can do that through a frequent reception of the Most Holy Eucharist. And we'll be back after a short break. Call us and share your Eucharistic aha moments at 877-757-9424. Again, that's 877-757-9424. We'll be right back.
It was somewhat of an accident, and I have a lot of windshield time driving for work, and usually I'm listening to my gospel music, and so I wanted to find something else different, and so I started scrolling. I found Guadalupe Radio. I started listening to it on a regular basis, and what I realized, had I found this station years ago, my conversion would have probably happened years ago.
The Guadalupe Radio Network, radio for your soul.
Catholic radio was there for me when I needed it. Even though I didn't think I needed it, it was there for me. I want everybody to know that I'm giving, not so that I can sit there and say that I gave to GRN for any other reason but this. I want that radio station to be there for anyone else who needs it also. They may not think they need it, but it's going to be there for them, whether it's in the future, whether it's right now. I want that radio station to always be there for them, just like it was there for me.
The Guadalupe Radio Network, radio for your soul.
Welcome back to The Quest, an extraordinary journey where every step brings us closer to discovering God's love for us. Want to join the conversation? Give us a call at 877-757-9424.
Hey y'all, welcome back to The Quest. I'm your Monday, Thursday host, Sarah Soto. If you're just tuning in, I'm a Catholic wife, mom, and speaker, and today we're talking all about those aha moments that we have had as Catholics with the Most Holy Eucharist, meaning, this is really Jesus who has died for me and given me his flesh to eat. Oh my goodness, how could I be loved this much? And it's just really, there's so many things we can say, and like I was saying earlier, each of us has our own journey, our own story. In our own relationship with the Lord, and some of us are on the journey. Some of us don't quite know or understand the Church's teaching on the Most Holy Eucharist. A lot of Catholics, from what we understand, don't believe that Jesus is truly present in the Most Holy Eucharist. But we know with absolute certainty that he is. He has revealed that reality to us, to our senses, many times through so many Eucharistic miracles. But that's not the central focus. The central focus is not hoping and waiting and wishing that you might be the person that sees the host turn into flesh and blood. But rather, our focus is intimate union with our Lord, intimate union, communion with Jesus, in the Most Holy Trinity. And so before we dive into the fruits of Holy Communion, there are many, I just want to share that there was a time in my life where I was away from the church for several years, the better part of a decade, I would say, in my teens and early 20s. And I don't have time to get into the whole entire story of how I wound up going to Mass, but I did, and I went to confession after a really long time. I went to Mass again the next day, and then I went the next day, and the next day, And I kept going after that. And I didn't realize it because it wasn't all of a sudden for me. It wasn't like a bolt of lightning with each communion, right? With each host that I received. But it was sort of, it did dawn on me all of a sudden. And one day I was in prayer. It wasn't any sort of, like I said, it wasn't some lightning bolt from heaven that came down, but I was just praying, and the Lord revealed to me in that time, in that sacred silence, which we all desperately need a little bit of each day. I try to get it done with a toddler. It's not easy. But in that sacred silence, I used to have a lot more of that time. The Lord revealed to me that a sin that I had struggled with, a very serious sin that I had struggled with for a long time, I hadn't come around. I hadn't been tempted by it. I hadn't been thinking about it. And it wasn't because I was consciously thinking, I better not commit this sin because then I can't receive Holy Communion. And I've been going every single day, and it's been really nice, and I've been really enjoying that. It's that for me, the fruit of frequent daily communion, dare I say, made me, it sanctified me, like made me stronger, fortified me, and made me stronger against temptation, particularly a sin that I had been bound by for a long, long time, and a sin that I didn't think I was ever going to be freed from. And so I didn't need, some of us think we need, right? And I love that the church has allowed some exorcists to come forward, and like the Debbie Georgianni and Adam Blaze show, although they're not priests, it's one of my favorite shows. It's one of my favorite programs ever. I love listening to it. It's super important for us to be aware of the spiritual realities the realities of spiritual warfare. And I think some of us at times can say, "Wow, I'm struggling with this sin. It must be a spiritual attack. I'm struggling with this, and I must need exorcism, right? It's got to be some form of exorcism prayers." And don't get me wrong, it's a beautiful and much needed ministry, and I'm totally I'm fascinated by it. I think it's really, I love Adam Blaine, Debbie Georgianni, and anytime I can catch her show, it's such a great joy for me. It's something that really interests me. But a lot of the time, what hinders us and what keeps us bound by sin it's not always, right? It's not necessarily always demonic, right? A lot of what binds us is our own sinfulness. And so there is no, the rite of exorcism is a rite, right? It's not a sacrament. But the sacrament of confession is where those chains are broken, right? So if you go to the sacrament of confession, you go to reconciliation, and you're reconciled back to the Father, right, through the grace won by Jesus in his passion, suffering, death, and resurrection. It breaks the chains. And the more frequently you take something to confession, the freer and freer you become. And the sacrament is extremely powerful. It's Jesus himself that breaks those bonds. But a lot of the time, the really crummy things going on in our lives, or particularly mine, it's because my own sinfulness. Nobody's attacking me. Nobody's out to get me. It's because I'm falling short. It's because I'm prideful. It's because I'm self-centered. It's because I love myself too much, or whatever. I don't want to let go of things. And I will say that the remedy of all remedies to fortify your mind and your heart and your soul against demonic influence, against your own sin, your own concupiscence, whatever you're struggling with, is frequent reception of Holy Communion. And I say that because my good friend, I went to Mass yesterday, and our best friend is a priest, and he was the one celebrating, and on Sunday, and it hit me like what is it? Why can't I think of the term? Like a ton of bricks? That's got to be it, right? It hit me like a ton of bricks. He said, if you're going to Mass every Sunday, and if you're going to Mass throughout the week, if you're going every single day, and you are not changing for the better, if you're not becoming holier, in other words, then something is off. and it's not Jesus' true presence. It's never going to be off. And so if we go, because we can, right? We can say, oh, look, so-and-so is so holy. She goes to mass every single day. She's definitely going to go to heaven. She's definitely like way better than I am. She's so reverent. Look at her. Look at the way he looks. Look at the way she looks. And that can be true, right? There can certainly be like an external piety that people have because they are super holy. But it's not the Eucharist isn't like a magic wand, right? That whoever goes up and receives is suddenly is going to be a canonized saint. And so I'll share, if any of you are fans of the Baltimore Catechism, there's some really, really good illustrations in there. And there's one that I always use when I talk about the Eucharist, receiving the Eucharist with when I, like for youth groups, right? When I give talks for young people. And so this image is really incredible. It's talking about how only people who are alive can eat food, right? It's kind of silly. It sounds silly, but it's true. Only people who are alive can eat food. So just like people who are living in a state of grace are the ones that can be nourished by the food of the Eucharist. If someone is dead because they're living in a state of mortal sin, if the person who is in a state of mortal sin goes to receive communion, they receive no more nourishment than a dead man if food were being forced down his throat. Ooh. But it's even worse. The Baltimore Catechism says it's even worse than trying to shove food down a dead man's throat, because if you receive Holy Communion when you're in a state of mortal sin, serious sin, it's a sacrilege. And I shared this on my Instagram story yesterday, and for those, I'm sure you know, but sacrilege is bad. Like you don't want to, sacrilege, not good sacrilege. And so it has this great comic of this little 1950s family sitting at a table, and they have this, of course, like the mom's in an apron, and there's like this beautiful like Cornish hen that she's like prepared and serving, and it says, there's a little caption that says, healthy people can eat. In other words, souls without sin can receive communion, and therefore the graces of Holy Communion. Then it has this guy, he's laid up in bed, right? He's got some soup, he's got a little tray table, there's no iPad around, it looks old. He's got like a cup of tea, he doesn't look well, and it says, sick people can eat, though it is harder. In other words, souls with venial sin can receive, but they get less grace when they do. You move on over to the third slide, and it's a picture of a cemetery plot that says rest in peace on it. And it's just in big, bold red letters, as the Baltimore Catechism tends to do. It says, dead people cannot eat. Souls in mortal sin cannot receive Holy Communion. They can't receive grace. And so it's certainly, you don't want to commit a sacrilege. If you have serious sin and you're aware of that sin, you need to go to confession before you receive Holy Communion. It's way, 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 way better to have people wondering why you're sitting down in the pew and not going to receive Holy Communion. It's way, way better for people to judge you. It's way, way better for you to feel embarrassed or awkward than it is for you to say, you know what, I'm just going to go anyway. I'll go to confession. Like, God forgives me. God and I are cool. Like, we got this thing going on. Like, I can commit these sins, and like those shirts that say like Jesus is my homeboy. That attitude is how you commit a sacrilege. And so again, if you are in a state of serious sin, the first order of business is getting to confession as soon as you can, as soon as you are able. I know there's not like a billion confession times everywhere all the time, but it should be top priority, so that when you receive Holy Communion, you are in the proper state to be nourished, right? With food for the journey, with food for the quest. And so when you receive Holy Communion, you get, there's no way to list, right? There's no way to list, there's no way to summarize, there's no way to explain all of the graces that the Lord wants to give you through Holy Communion. It's on you. Jesus is going to fully show up. Jesus is fully present. His entire, like his body, his blood, soul, and divinity is 100% showing up every single time. It's you. How much grace you're going to receive depends on your receptivity. How open are you? Because the fruit is just absolutely incredible. And I can't wait to get into all that. So today we're talking about the Eucharist, if you're just tuning in, and what it means, what the basic beliefs that the church has always taught about Most Holy Eucharist, and what we need to know as Catholics in order to properly receive Holy Communion. And we're going to unpack the section of the Catechism that is entitled "The Fruits of Holy Communion." So you go to receive Holy Communion, and then you go on with your week, right? If you go to Mass every Sunday, you receive the Lord, and then what? What happens after that? What is it supposed to do? Like, what's supposed to happen, right? If you're going and you're going to confession, so you're in a state of grace, and you're receiving Holy Communion, what's next? So I hope to share that with you all listening today. And I want to encourage you to call in and share your story about the Eucharist. Share the story or the moment or the encounter that you had. Perhaps it was on a retreat. Perhaps it was at a very quiet, little poorly attended Mass that you went to when you were on vacation sometime at some parish you had never been to before. Or perhaps it came to you in prayer, right? And you weren't even at Mass, and the Lord revealed to you in prayer, "This is truly my body, blood, soul, and divinity in the Mass, and I desire to be in communion with you." So what's your story? Call and share with us here on The Quest what has been your aha moment with the Eucharist, when you really started to understand that what the Church has always taught about the Eucharist is true. 877-757-9424. That's 877-757-9424. Share with us what has been the moment where it dawned on you. You had your, like the light bulb goes off, and you just know that it's truly Jesus present in the Most Holy Eucharist. Was it during adoration? Was it after an amazing talk you heard? Was it when you were listening to the Guadalupe Radio Network? 877-757-9424. Give us a call and share your aha moment with the Most Holy Eucharist. 877-757-9424. Again, I'm your Monday, Thursday host here on The Quest. We are all on this pilgrimage of faith together. Remember, you can join us Monday through Friday with other fantastic hosts, Steve Gleason and Monsignor Charles Pope, every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, 4 p.m. Central, 5 p.m. Eastern, here on the Guadalupe Radio Network. I'm your host, Sarah Soto. We'll be back after a short break.
This is Life News Radio. I'm Jim Anderson. The Media Research Center is watching trends at legacy media outlets on the topic of abortion. While not everyone in legacy media is sold on the Democrat Party's Shout Your Abortion strategy, some outlets seem to be focusing on motivating or even radicalizing strong abortion supporters. Admittedly anecdotal canvassing by Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America is finding warning signs for Democrats on abortion, with many even pro-abortion Americans discovering Democrats to be too extreme on abortion. Drawing closer to elections, the latest FACE Act sentencing against pro-life protest at one abortion clinic involves more lenient sentencing last week. James Zastro, Ava Zastro, and Paul Place were sentenced to 90 days home detention and 3 years probation. UK Right to Life is offering another criticism of the Paris Olympics. Adding to other controversies, the Paris organizers paid homage to 3 advocates of eugenic abortion. This is Life News Radio. North Ireland authorities are taking up the policing of prayer near abortion operations. 2 pro-life advocates were arrested for praying on a busy street across from a hospital after police received phone calls complaining about the 2 praying next to an image of the Virgin Mary. Nebraska's November election will feature 2 opposing constitutional amendments, one that bans essentially all second and third trimester abortions, and one that opens the door to all abortions. And Wesley Smith says supposedly strict guidelines in legalized assisted suicides are a fraud. He points to meticulous research showing those guidelines have failed. Just looking at eating disorders, 60 people, likely more, are documented to have illicitly qualified as terminally ill for arranged dying in assisted suicides. For pro-life headlines delivered to your email address daily, sign up at lifenews.com. This has been Life News Radio.
You're listening to The Quest, a pilgrimage of faith. Have a question or something to share? Call the show live at 877-757-9424.
Hey y'all, welcome back to The Quest. I'm your Monday, Thursday host, Sarah Soto. It's such a great joy to be here with you all, talking about the best thing in the whole entire universe, which is Jesus, in the most holy sacrament, body, blood, soul, and divinity in the Eucharist. And so I think a lot of, how should I say this? I did not receive formation from my parents or catechists that helped me understand what I should have understood about the Eucharist when I made my first Holy Communion, and I was confirmed at the same time. So I also didn't. I was 7, but even at the age of 7, I didn't. I just didn't know, and it was never. I didn't continue any formal catechism after that, and we didn't really talk about the faith not until I hit that tender age, that tender prepubescent age where you just want to rebel and ask a bunch of questions and say, well, why do we got to do this? Why do we got to go here? And so only as an adult, which many of you I think can probably relate to, only as an adult did I say, I need to understand if this is what we believe and this is what I'm supposed to believe as a faithful Catholic. I need to understand. I need to break open my catechism. I need to study. I need to go to school. I need to listen to fantastic Catholic radio like you hear on GRN. I need to learn more about what the Church teaches so that I have a deeper understanding, and so that at the time I wasn't married, but if I have a family in the future, so I can help form my children like I'm supposed to. Yes, you parents are the primary formators of your children and educators as well. I know, it's wild, but you are primary formator, primary educator of your child. So I wanted, before I was married, before I had children, I wanted to be able to answer difficult questions. So that was my motivation. I wanted to understand for my own sake, for my own understanding, but I also wanted to be able to teach. But as time went on, and I think many of you can understand, especially those in the comment sections on social media defending the faith left and right, from people who are poorly catechized, don't know what they're talking about, or anti-Catholic altogether. I think kind of the next step, and my own personal belief, my own personal understanding of the Eucharist, and then being able to explain, to some degree, the Church's teaching on the Eucharist, then it kind of develops into, at least it did for me, this incessant need to be able to defend those teachings. And so I started taking in all these apologetics, and I started reading all the material that I could. I ended up going to school, to get my degree in theology. I was I've got to be able to defend the faith and defend it well. And so I'm sure many of you can relate to that. And so my hope again for you in today's show is to understand how to explain and defend what the Church teaches about the fruits of receiving Holy Communion. So first and foremost, the first thing listed under the section, and I'm in the Catechism, and you can look it up or write this down. I'm in the Catechism, paragraph 1391. And so I do encourage you, I strongly encourage you to read your Catechism and to do so with some frequency. You may be feeling I wonder what the Catholic Church teaches about astrology, and you can look up in the old index and say oh my gosh, I didn't know that. I better not practice anything related to astrology ever again. And see, now you know. You heard it here first. But I will say that there are so many beautiful, beautiful teachings that are so clear and have so many incredible footnotes from sacred scripture, from the early church fathers. And so the Catechism is a wealth, and take advantage of it. We are very, very wealthy with knowledge and history in the Catholic Church. And so take advantage of the Catechism. Get yourself a good copy, a big copy, a hefty copy, and read it. Read it so that if there is something that the Catholic Church teaches, say, for example, what it teaches about marriage, and read the Catechism. How many people are married and can't tell you what the Church really teaches about Catholic marriage? Not from what they think not about what they think the Church teaches, not what they've heard that the Church teaches. Literally, what the actual Catholic Church teaches officially about the sacrament of matrimony, of holy matrimony. So don't be that guy. Be the guy that reads their catechism. And so, like I said, you can join me in paragraph 1391 now, or you can write it down so you can check it out for yourself later. And that's the beautiful thing, right, about the faith, is you don't have to trust that I'm just making stuff up as I go, picking up the Bible and saying, I think this means this. We have a long, long, long history and a lot of wisdom. And, that apostolic succession helps quite a bit. So the first fruit listed under the fruits of Holy Communion in the Catechism I want to talk about is that Holy Communion augments our union with Christ. If you are not receiving Holy Communion, you are not in an intimate union with Him. I mean, he literally, we can just go back to the Gospel of St. John here. He says, if I'm the living bread that has come down from heaven. If you eat of this bread, you'll live forever. And so it's pretty clear when it comes to receiving Holy Communion that if you want to be intimately united with the Most Holy Trinity, which is the purpose for which you were created, you need to do so by receiving Holy Communion. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. You can certainly pray. You can certainly be familiar with sacred scripture. You can certainly heed the Lord's commands to love one another as He has loved us, and you can lay down your life and you can live as holy of a life as you possibly can. But if you're not receiving Holy Communion, if you're not receiving the Eucharist, you don't have the intimate communion that Jesus wants to have with you. This is the only way to do it. The Lord goes on to say, "He who eats my flesh and drinks my blood abides in me, and I in him." Life in Christ, that I'm here in the Catechism, has its foundation in the Eucharistic banquet. As the living Father sent me, I live because of the Father, so he who eats me will live because of me. It doesn't get a lot clearer than that, folks. So if you want to be in intimate union, intimate communion with the Most Holy Trinity, you need to receive the Eucharist. It could not be clearer. And so if you are in a place in your life where you are not able to receive Holy Communion, like let's say you are married by the Catholic Church, civilly divorced, and then living with someone now who is not the person you are sacramentally married to, you're in a state where you can't receive Holy Communion right now, right? So it may seem daunting. It may seem like, I got to go through this process. I got to go do all these things, and I got to right these wrongs. There's just so many things to do, and the fact of the matter is we should be willing to do whatever it takes to enter into this union with Christ. We should desire to knock down any barricades and any walls that prevent us from entering into intimate communion, intimate union with Christ. Nothing should get in our way. Nothing should be seen as an inconvenience. We should do whatever it takes because that's what we need. That's what God gave us to be in communion with Him. The second on the list of fruits of receiving Holy Communion, the second one says essentially that the Eucharist is spiritual nourishment. It's food for the soul. So receiving Holy Communion preserves, increases, and renews the life of grace that we received at our baptism. It's communion with the very flesh of Christ. And if you are going to grow, in the Christian life, you need, and it's not that it would be preferable or you should want to, or it would be nice. No, folks, the Catechism says that if you want to grow in the Christian life, you need the nourishment of Eucharistic communion, because it's the bread for our pilgrimage until the moment of death. If we are able to receive, we'll receive it at the moment of death to carry us home to our to eternity. And so, just like you have to eat food to keep your body going, Holy Communion does the same thing, but for your soul. It achieves this for your spiritual life, and so it should be for all of us Christians. The Eucharist should be the source and summit of our faith, as Pope John Paul II said. It should be everything. It should be. I think I've shared with you all before. a lay member of SOLT, the Society of Our Lady of the Most Holy Trinity, and our founder father, Father James Flanagan, was constantly talking about how we have to live from communion to communion. All right, so today's Monday, right? So I just received Holy Communion yesterday, right, on Sunday. So I received Holy Communion yesterday morning, and so if I'm not going to receive again until, let's say Wednesday, right? So the grace that I received from receiving Holy Communion on Sunday should carry me through to Wednesday, and Jesus residing in me for as long as I allow him, and being in a state of grace for as long as I am able, should carry me through to Wednesday, and I should be living from that communion to the next. So when I'm not meditating on the reality of who I've received and the intimate union that I have entered into with Christ, then I should be preparing for the next time I receive Holy Communion. So are we, as Catholic Christians, are we spending, if we only go to Mass on Sundays, right, if we go to Mass every single Sunday, is our entire week focused on the fact that we are going to receive Jesus this upcoming Sunday? And are all of the fruits of the week coming from the reality that we just did this previous Sunday? Are we living from communion to communion because it's the source and the summit of our faith, because it's the center of our whole universe, because it's God himself? It's God himself who nourishes us with his very body. So are we have to ask ourselves quite honestly, are we living from communion to communion? It's the nourishment that we need for our spiritual journey. And it's the only thing, it's the only person who's going to give us the grace that we need in order to become the saints that the Lord has called us to be. Moving on to 1393. And again, if you're just tuning in, I'm in the section of the Catechism of the Catholic Church, paragraph 1391, and that begins with the title, The Fruits of Holy Communion. So we're talking about what are the fruits when you receive Holy Communion? What are you supposed to do? What happens next? Do you just receive it because you're Catholic and you're just checking there's just a checkbox that I went to Mass and I received, like some people, we need to, let's bring back reverent language for the Most Holy Eucharist too. People are like, yeah, when I went up to get the bread, that's how I'm just like, listen, I'm from a part of the world, and that's where people talk. And that's how people talk, and it's we need to be referring to it to him as who he is, which is Jesus in the Most Holy Eucharist. And so I will say that going through this in preparation for the show and reading the fruits of Holy Communion here in the Catechism, I can see how in so many ways, even after I came back to the church so long ago now, I can see the many ways that I have not been able to bear the fruit of Holy Communion and receiving Holy Communion and doing so frequently, when I lose sight of what I'm doing it all for. And I think it's easy for us to get wrapped up in everyday life, and we lose sight of the reality that the fruits of Holy Communion are meant to sanctify us and to help sanctify our families, and for the conversion of souls, for the salvation of souls. And that's a mighty big task. And so talking about the fruits of Holy Communion, number one, right, that's going to augment your union with Christ. It's going to put you into a deeper friendship, deeper communion with the Most Holy Trinity. And again, I'll say over and over and over again till I'm blue in the face, that is the very purpose for which you were made. So no matter what your job is, no matter what you look like, no matter how many followers you have, at the end of the day, the purpose for which you were created is to enter into deep, intimate union and communion with the Most Holy Trinity. And so everything else doesn't matter as much. And so if that's your focus and you want to live out that reality and live out your purpose, you should receive Holy Communion when you are in a state of grace as often as you are able. As often as you are able to. Maybe you can get to daily Mass once a week. Other than Sunday, do it. Go for it. Maybe you can go every day. Maybe you just found out there's a 6 a.m. Mass and you're thinking, hey, I can go to Mass 5 days a week, 6 days a week, 7 days a week. This is needed more than anything. let's go back to frequent communion, daily communion. I'm your host, Sarah Soto. I'm with you on Mondays and Thursdays here on the Guadalupe Radio Network, host of The Quest. We'll be back after a very short break talking about the Most Holy Eucharist today. We'll be right back.
This is Franciscan Media's Saint of the Day for August 5th. Today we celebrate the dedication of Rome's St. Mary Major Basilica. Typically, the Church's liturgical calendar calls for the celebration of a holy person, but today we celebrate the dedication of a holy place, St. Mary Major, one of Rome's 4 major basilicas. The others are St. Peter's, St. John Lateran, and St. Paul outside the walls. The present church of St. Mary Major was built in the 5th century, not long after a church council affirmed Mary's title as Mother of God. The basilica is the largest church in the world honoring God through Mary. It stands atop one of Rome's 7 hills, and despite many restorations, still has the character of an early Roman basilica. Relics from the manger in Bethlehem are reportedly held in the basilica, which also boasts mosaics dating from the 5th century. Today's feast was once commemorated as the Feast of Our Lady of the Snows. According to legend, the basilica was constructed on the site where the Mother of God produced a miraculous midsummer snowfall and left her footprints as a sign. The legend was long celebrated by releasing a shower of white rose petals from the basilica dome every August 5th. There's more about the saints along with inspiration and Catholic resources at our website, saintoftheday.org. From Franciscan Media, this has been Saint of the Day.
This is The Quest from the studios of the Guadalupe Radio Network. Share the show with a friend. You can find us on social media. Want to listen again? We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you enjoy listening to podcasts.
Hey y'all, welcome back. I'm your Monday, Thursday host of The Quest, Sarah Soto. It's such a joy to be with you all. I'm a Catholic wife, mom, and speaker. For more information or to contact me, you can visit my website at sarahsotospeaks.com. If you have any questions about anything we discussed on the show, or if you want to reach out to us, you can always shoot us an email at thequest@grnonline.com. Folks, today we are doing a continuation of last Thursday's topic. I was talking about the aha moments with the Most Blessed Sacrament when we realize, oh my goodness, this is really Jesus. And it dawns on us. We get the lightning bolt from heaven, or we have sort of the slow build-up realization that, you know, my faith has increased. The Lord has answered my prayers, and I really believe that this is Him. I shared several of those moments. Our listeners called in and shared their beautiful moments of realizing that it's truly Jesus in the Most Holy Sacrament and the great graces that they've received, private graces, right, from heaven, where the Lord has increased their faith and showed them that it's truly Him in the Most Holy Sacrament of the altar. And so we talked about what's necessary, right, in order for you to receive Holy Communion, proper guidelines for receiving Holy Communion, and what the Catholic Church, in a very basic way, teaches about the Most Holy Eucharist. But now we're digging into the section starting in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, paragraph 1391, for your reference. We're talking about the fruits of Holy Communion. So a lot of Catholics probably, and I don't know, maybe you don't. Maybe you're like, no. I know who I'm going to receive, and I know what to do next. But in the work that I do, I have encountered a lot of people that are going to receive Holy Communion because it sounds kind of silly, but because they like to. Going to church makes them feel good, and they like being Catholic because that's how they were raised. They don't know any other faith tradition, and they simply enjoy going. And so for them, and I've had several people share with me throughout the years that for them it's just what they do. It's just what makes them feel good, and they're not going because of what's true. And what's true is that Jesus is truly present, and we must believe that. As Catholics, as Christians must believe that Jesus is truly present in the Most Holy Eucharist. And so once you believe that, you should know that there are so many fruits that the Catholic Church teaches that come from receiving Holy Communion. And so we talked about how it deepens it places you. You enter into an intimate union with Christ when you receive the Eucharist. We also talked about how it's spiritual nourishment or food for the soul. Holy Communion preserves and increases and renews that life of grace that you received at your holy baptism. It also, or Holy Communion, and this is probably, well, I don't know, it's hard to pick a favorite fruit of Holy Communion, but this is probably my favorite if I had to pick one. And that the reality is that Holy Communion separates us from sin. So the Eucharist cannot unite us to Jesus without at the same time cleansing us. Like it can't unite both. I mean, it has to when it deepens our union with Christ, when receiving Holy Communion unites us to Christ, it must then, by default, at the same time cleanse us from past sins, preserve us from future sins. All your venial sins are wiped away, and really the Eucharist preserves you from future mortal sins. It fortifies you. It strengthens you. Not saying that you can't commit a mortal sin if you receive Holy Communion and you do so reverently, but it will most certainly, one of the fruits of receiving Holy Communion is that it makes you better prepared to avoid temptation and to avoid committing sin, to avoid committing serious sin. I mean, that's like let's throw a party exciting. Like let's shout it from the rooftops. Like how many Catholics do you know? How many Catholics do we know that really believe that receiving Holy Communion, that one of the fruits of receiving Holy Communion and doing so in a state of grace can help us like on our battle against spiritual warfare? Like it can help fortify us. And that, I mean, that's one of my biggest aha moments in receiving Holy Communion is realizing before my very eyes, I hadn't even realized that because I was receiving in a state of grace and because I was doing so reverently and really believing that Jesus was present in the Eucharist and wanted to bestow grace upon me, I didn't even realize that a very serious sin that I had struggled with for so long had simply been taken from me. And it's not like it might not work that way for everybody, and it might not work that way for you. You might have to really put in a lot of work and trust me, there's still many sins that I struggle with. But this was a very serious sin, and it weighed very heavily on me. And man, receiving Jesus in the Most Holy Eucharist and doing so frequently, the Lord just took it. He just took it because I couldn't be at the same time united to him in the Most Holy Sacrament of the altar and clinging to those serious sins. It just doesn't work that way. Jesus doesn't touch sin. He's not near sin. And so we are, when we are in a state of grace and we can receive Holy Communion, we receive more graces than there's any time in any radio show for me to share. Furthermore, some of the fruits of receiving Holy Communion are you're in unity with the mystical body. So the Eucharist makes the church, and everyone who receives the Eucharist are more closely united to Christ. And through the Eucharist, Christ unites them all into one body, which is the Holy Catholic Church. Also, another fave. They're all my favorite. Can they all be my favorite? The Eucharist commits us to the poor. The Eucharist commits us to the poor. We must recognize Christ in the poorest of the poorest, his brethren. Our sins have been forgiven. We're called to be in that intimate union with Christ and be merciful towards the poor. It softens our hearts towards them. And it's just, what a great grace, right? If you're not in a state of grace, if you're not receiving Holy Communion, it's so easy to be cold-hearted towards those in need. But man, there's just something about being in intimate communion with Christ that softens your heart towards the poor and towards serving them in whatever capacity, even if it's just, even if, for me personally, this rings so true because before I came back to the church, I used to actively avoid looking at people who were asking for money on the side of the street, right? They'd have a sign up and you'd be at the stoplight forever, and suddenly you've got to look in my visor for a CD that I don't even have a CD player in this car, but I've suddenly got to look in this visor for a really long time. Oh, the light's green. I don't have to look anymore. All right, I got to go. And I used to focus really hard. I couldn't look. And it was because my heart had been hardened towards the poor, and not even actively, not even like, a poor person, I can't look at them. It was just I'd become so bitter, and my heart had become so hardened. Now, because I'm receiving Holy Communion in a state of grace and wanting to be in intimate union with Christ, now I always try to make eye contact actively, and smile and wave. And in a perfect world, I'd have all the resources and things to solve everyone's problems financially. But we don't live in a perfect world. And so my heart has been softened toward the poor, towards those who are homeless, especially because of the Eucharist. There's no other way around it. I didn't just dawn on me where I shouldn't be making eye contact with people who are asking for money on the side of the road. The Eucharist did that. And so that's a huge change for me, for going from being in a place where I couldn't even look and didn't even want to look and wanted to avoid having to look at someone in the eyes, to going to rolling down my window, saying hi and saying, hey, how you doing? Just eye contact. It makes a huge difference, and I can absolutely attribute that. The last and final fruit of receiving Holy Communion that I'd like to share with you all is that it reminds us to pray for the unity of all Christians, and that Christ revealed to St. Gertrude the Great. Okay, this is it. So buckle down. Christ revealed to St. Gertrude the Great that each time one person receives Holy Communion, something good happens to every being in heaven, on earth, and in purgatory. I'm going to say it again. Jesus himself revealed to St. Gertrude the Great, if you don't know her, become friends with her ASAP. Jesus himself revealed to St. Gertrude the Great that each time one person receives Holy Communion, in a state of grace, something good happens to every being in heaven, on earth, and in purgatory. That's incredible. Isn't that absolutely incredible? It's so great to be Catholic, isn't it? Isn't it so great to be Catholic? And we have the fullness of the faith, and we have the most holy Eucharist helping us to, or uniting us to Christ in only the way that receiving his body, blood, soul, and divinity, as he promised we would, can do. And so it's such a great joy to be with you all. Listen, I've got a really exciting show coming up this Thursday, the 8th. So you'll want to tune into that. It's an incredible ministry called Life-Giving Wounds, talking about adult children of divorce, a much, much needed ministry. I'm your Monday, Thursday host, Sarah Soto. I'm a Catholic wife, mom, and speaker. For more information or to contact me, you can always visit my website at sarahsotospeaks.com. As always, thank you so much for joining. You can stream online at grnonline.com or on your Guadalupe Radio Network app. God bless you.
Celebrating the culture of life. This is the Guadalupe Radio Network. Radio for your soul.